Hello, I'm Brian. I'm coming at you today from my basement woodworking shop, and I want to talk to you about a Farmall bolster shaft. This is the center pivot upper bolster shaft. Out in the garage, we are busy replacing the shaft and the bearings on a 1944 Farmall H. The video isn't necessarily about that. The video is about the confusion when ordering a new shaft. Farmall made some changes in 1944, and it makes ordering parts kind of confusing. But I believe in this video, I can explain what changed in 1944, and I can explain the new parts and the bolster. So stand by. First, I would like to say, to arm myself for this project, I watched a couple online videos. One from Squatch 253, I believe it was a Farmall M they were working on, and the other one from Kinny Kizzle working on his 1942 Farmall H Memorial Suicide Awareness project. Watching that video in particular gave me a lot of confidence to go ahead and tear this bolster assembly apart. And you can do it too. It's pretty easy to do. And I think in my next video, I will show assembling it because we already have the tractor apart. But in this video, once again, we will concentrate on what changed in the shaft, which is right behind me, and I think why Farmall did it. And I think this will help you when you go to order parts. Here's the new shaft. It's sitting on one of the benches in my woodworking shop. This shaft, and there's a complete bearing kit, was ordered from a popular online parts company. I don't want to divulge the name. I'm not supported or anything like that. But take a look at this new shaft. Now, right off the bat, we elected to change the old shaft to replace the shaft because on the old shaft, this is really worn out. You can see the diameter of a factory new shaft. And the reason I called this out right away so early in the video is if you are buying a shaft from, say, somebody on eBay, for example, I'd be very reluctant to buy until I knew the diameter of this shaft. On the shaft we took out, this was heavily worn down, especially on the back side, the side that faces the operator. That's where the force is at. So if you were to buy a used shaft, you'd want to know what this dimension was. Farmall, I should say International Harvester, in 1944 changed their shaft design. In the Farmall shaft, the early shafts, this was all a one piece. Now this particular shaft happens to be two pieces. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But early on, Farmall made a square cut right here, right where my pointer is, as they machined the shaft. Well, that made for a weak area, probably a lot of stresses in there, and if the shaft broke, it would break right there. So in 1944, they made a new shaft and they machined in a radius, a fillet, right in there. For example, if you watch Kinny Kizzle's video, you can clearly see that fillet. So that shaft, you know, is from mid-1944 or later. Consequently, what the International Harvester engineers had to do, because this is where the thrust bearing sits. This is the surface that the thrust bearing sits. When there was a radius in there, of course, you couldn't set a thrust washer or a thrust bearing on there. So they had to make a washer, and the washer on the back side has the corresponding radius on it. In that way, then, they had a flat surface to install or to set the bearing on. I'm filming this with my handheld camera. Now, in this replacement shaft, what they did to make this shaft, and I think it's kind of clever, This is a two-piece design. They have this inner shaft here, and you can see this outer one is perhaps pressed on, or maybe it's shrunk on with heat. But either way, there isn't going to be a stress area in there. What they did to manufacture this is they welded this piece on. And actually, if I were to tip this shaft over just a little bit here, you can see on the back how they welded the center shaft all onto this bottom plate, which is where the steering pedestal is going to attach. Now, this particular shaft, once again, the bearing will go straight on. We will not reuse that spacer. And then, of course, on top of the bearing goes the dust retainer. And two other things I want to tell you about. If I can keep my camera steady here. If there is wear in the cast iron section of the Bolster, I did make some washers. Now, I elected to make these out of aluminum, but what we will do is I will put them on like such, and that'll give us another 1/8 of an inch of space. The other dimension that was confusing to me when I ordered this, and I'll show you right now, some of you will have questions with this too, I'll just put a little washer on there, is this height, the stacked height from this plate to where that cut is. And that's 3 7/8 inches. If I had the old shaft here, I am sure that that shaft with that spacer also measures the same. Now you see, that's how this company gets by with this one shaft being the service part for all years. Then in that way, if you buy this shaft and if you buy this kit, it's all engineered to work together. I also want to talk briefly about this main bushing. I think it's kind of neat. It's a split bushing design. This will go into the cast iron housing of the Bolster. But I think it's very nice how they made it. It's lined with, it looks like Teflon. I'll get my camera to focus here. Let me set it down, perhaps it'll focus better. To me, that looks like a real high quality bushing. And of course now, this will fit. I'll lower it down on the shaft here. I'll squeeze it together, and that's a real nice fit. And so this will fix up the steering in the Farmall H very nicely. I think all in all, this is a pretty good kit. I think all in all, this is a pretty good shaft. And I think this will help you to understand what changed in Farmall in 1944. And just to recap, what changed is they went from a square machined to a fillet. And then that drove the need for a spacer washer, which you'll see in the parts catalog starting in mid-1944 and beyond. Well, that's all I have to say for this. I hope you found it useful, and I hope too you will watch those other videos and find the courage to go replace the Bolster shaft if necessary and the bushing bearings in your tractor. It really is pretty easy to do. Well, it was easy to take apart. We haven't put it back together yet because the parts just came today. But for sure, it'll certainly restore the steering nice on this 1944 Farmall H tractor. Thank you. Once again, this is Brian. Have fun working on your tractor.